Today we're going to HD 44.12. That is Sutta 12 of Sutta Discovery, volume 44. The Maha Gosinga Sutta. Maha means great, here means greater. Gosinga is the name of the forest, it means cow horn, which has already been explained in the talk on the Chula Gosinga Sutta. And this is from M32, the Greater Gosinga Discourse, or the Greater Discourse in the Gosinga Forest. So this is a kind of, there are more monks involved here, the great arhats. They have assembled together in this forest, and it was a full moon night, so it's a beautiful night, and sal trees were all in blossom. They were very big, beautiful flowers, pink flowers. So these monks were gathered together, and what do arhats do when they get together? Well, let's find out. So the translation is on page 132. The Greater Gosinga Discourse, M32. Thus have I heard. At one time the Blessed One was residing in the Gosinga Sal Forest Grove with a great many very well-known elder disciples, such as the Venerable Sariputta, the Venerable Mahamoggallana, the Venerable Mahakassapa, the Venerable Anuruddha, the Venerable Revata, the Venerable Ananda, and other very well-known elder disciples. Now all the names here refer to arhats except Ananda. He is still a stream winner. Maybe that's why his name is mentioned last. All the other names are mentioned first. Like Sariputta, as we know, is ordained the earliest in this group. Sariputta followed by Moggallana and then Mahakassapa, Anuruddha, Revata. But of these, probably Ananda was ordained just after Sariputta, Moggallana. So in a sense, he is quite senior too. But here is placed last because he's a stream winner. The other monks are arhats. Then in the evening, the Venerable Mahamoggallana emerged from his solitary retreat, approached the Venerable Mahakassapa, and said this to him: "Come, Avuso Kassapa, let us go to the Venerable Sariputta and listen to the Dharma." So here we see monks, two monks, going to see another monk, elder monk, to hear the Dharma. Right? So notice here, they are arhats, but they still talk on the Dharma, and they listen to each other talk on the Dharma, because it's so joyful to hear the Dharma. And so Mahakassapa says, "Yes, I was so," and they went to see, and they start walking to see Venerable Sariputta. Then, verse 3, then the Venerable Ananda saw the Venerable Mahamoggallana and the Venerable Mahakassapa, and the Venerable Anuruddha approached the Venerable Sariputta to listen to the Dharma. Right? So in other words, now you have three of them. So the Venerable Ananda then also decide to go. Yeah? So we have quite a few people here. So we have a group of how many monks here? 2, 4, 6 of them all together. So they gathered together, and then section 4 now. Now the Venerable Sariputta saw the Venerable Revata and the Venerable Ananda coming from afar. Seeing the Venerable Ananda, he said this to him: "Come now, Venerable Ananda, welcome to the Venerable Ananda, the Blessed One's attendant who is always in the Blessed One's presence. Avuso Ananda, Delightful is the Gosinger Sal forest grove. Lovely is the moonlit night. The sal trees are all in full blossom. There seems to be a divine fragrance wafting about, right? So it's a beautiful scenery. It's a full moon night, very bright. You need to be out there in the open, where there are trees, not too much trees, but a bit open, and you can see that the moon, full moon, is very bright, very beautiful. In a sense, these are things we miss today, this beautiful natural phenomenon. So here the Arahats are gathered on this full moon night. So here notice the Venerable Sariputta is addressing Venerable Ananda, because he's the next senior monk there. And then comes the theme of the sutta. The Venerable Sariputta asks this question of the Venerable Ananda. Avuso Ananda, by what kind of monk would illuminate this Gosinger Sal forest? Or this Gosinger Sal forest can be illuminated, or should be illuminated, should be brightened up, should be beautified by what kind of monk? So this is the question. Now what's the meaning of this question? It means, well, they're arahats, so they're talking to each other. So what they're saying is, well, it's such a beautiful night. What kind of monk does this remind us of, or remind you of? So it's that kind of arahat talk, if you like. Okay? So the question is asked to the Venerable Ananda first. So Ananda replies, he says, "Here Avuso Sariputta, a monk is very learned, remembers what he hears, a store of learning, whatever teachings that are beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end, endowed both in the spirit and in the letter, that proclaims the holy life utterly complete and pure. In such a Dhamma he is very learned, remembers it, masters it verbally, investigates it mentally, well penetrates it by seeing or by right view. He teaches the four assemblies, that Dharma, well sounding in word and letter, well flowing for the sake of uprooting the latent tendencies. Such a man, Avuso Sariputta, would illuminate this Gosinger Sal forest." Okay, so here we see Ananda, in a sense, is describing his own abilities. Okay, so Ananda is very learned, he's like to teach the Dhamma. And when this was said, the Venerable Sariputta then questioned the Venerable Revata, the same question. So here we have this what's called a kind of concatenation series. The statement by the first monk is built up, and then another statement is added. So Sariputta says, now we ask the Venerable Revata about this. Avuso Revata, Ananda has said this, so what about you, Avuso Revata? It's such a beautiful moonlit night in this Gosinger forest grove. What kind of monk you think would beautify this place? Then the Venerable Revata replies, "Here Avuso Sariputta, a monk delights in solitude, enjoys solitude, devoted to mental calm, never neglecting dhyana, accomplished in insight, frequents empty places." So these are all references, allusions to meditation. Here, as we know, the Venerable Revata, he's a lone dweller. He stays alone and he enjoys meditation. So he says this is the kind of monk who would illuminate this beautiful Gosinger Sal grove, or Sal forest grove. And then the Venerable Sariputta now turns to the Venerable Anuruddha. So it says here, Avuso Anuruddha, the Venerable Revata is spoken. So now, how about you? What do you think? What kind of monk would beautify, would illuminate this wonderful, this beautiful forest, full moonlit, and the forest in full bloom tonight? And the Venerable Anuruddha replies, section 6.3, here Avuso Sariputta, a monk surveys 1,000 worlds with the divine eye, purified, surpassing that of the human. Just as a man with eyes, Avuso Sariputta, who has gone up to the upper story of a mansion, would survey 1,000 wheel rims on the ground. Even so, Sariputta, that monk surveys 1,000 worlds with a divine eye, purified, surpassing that of the human. Right? So here, as we know, Anuruddha has got this ability, this wonderful ability to survey the universe and also to read the minds of others. So he has got this divine eye. Okay. Now, what's interesting here is the sutta says, in this sutta, the Venerable Anuruddha describes the universe as wheels. They look like wheels. So, in other words, even in the Buddha's time, the ancient monks were aware of kind of the worlds are going in like in a circle, it's like galaxies. So this is very interesting information. However, interestingly, when this text was translated into Chinese, the Chinese version has a slightly different wording. It says that when Anuruddha looks down, when this person looks down from the high building, he sees the world like brickwork on the ground. So that's the Chinese conception of the universe at that time. So we have a different translation there. So now the Venerable Sariputta turns to Mahakassapa. So said, Venerable Mahakassapa, what do you think? What kind of monk would illuminate this beautiful forest tonight? So what does Mahakassapa say? He says, Avuso Sariputta, a monk is himself a forest dweller. And so here we see Mahakassapa talking about his own qualities, okay, or from his experience, in other words. He's a forest dweller. Now here we have to understand he's not praising himself, but he's saying other monks who do this. He knows because he has been this kind of monk. So he says that if those monks practice in this way, they surely will do well to beautify the forest. The word is sobeti, to make the forest beautiful. He is himself one who lives on alms food. So here we see Mahakassapa referring to some of the what are called the ascetic practices, and is himself one who resorts to the dust heap cloth, right? So using pieces of cloth, stitch them together to make rag ropes. He is himself one who uses only the 3 ropes. In other words, doesn't have any extra ropes. He just wear the same old ropes, very simple life. And he is himself one of few wishes, very simple life. And he is himself one who is contented. He is himself one who lives in solitude. He is himself one who is above socializing, so he keeps away from being too friendly with the lay people, or even with other monks for that matter. He is himself one who exerts energy, in other words, direct his efforts, body and mind, to mindfulness and meditation. He is himself accomplishing moral virtue. He is himself accomplishing concentration. He is himself accomplishing wisdom. So here we have moral virtue, concentration, wisdom, the three training in a row, and is himself accomplished in liberation, and is himself accomplished in the knowledge and vision of liberation. So here we see this last part, Sila Samadhi Panya, right? Moral virtue, concentration, wisdom, and then liberation, and then the knowledge that the person has been liberated. So we see a nice flow of teachings here. So this is the kind of monk that would beautify this place, this beautiful forest. Now what's interesting here is when we see in the early suttas, there's always this very nice systematic flow of teachings in a list. I was reading the Mahayana, an article about the Mahayana Sutta called Samadhi Raja Sutta. I mean, the title is very impressive, and the king of meditation sutta. But in this sutta, although the word samadhi is there in front, you'll find in that sutta there's no mention of meditation at all. There's only a list, quite a long list, very long list of qualities, of all kinds of good qualities which need to be cultivated. But those qualities don't seem to have some kind of flow in the system. They're almost random, as it were. Almost as if the writer of that sutta kind of just put together a few items. And what's even more interesting is the word samadhi is used, and apparently this sutta was written around the time of Sangha, maybe a little earlier. And apparently, according to some scholars who have studied this very carefully, they say that the word samadhi here actually refers to the list of items. It doesn't refer to meditation, but just the list of all those qualities. And sometimes the word samadhi also refers to the sutta itself. So in other words, the meaning of samadhi, or even dhyana in other texts, has changed in the Mahayana. They don't really refer to meditation. They refer to simply teachings, lists of teachings. In other words, it has become theoretical. And so this is a very interesting development we see in later Buddhism. It became very philosophical and very formal and ritualistic, in other words. So that is, for that reason, it's always good to go back to the early sutta if you really want to know what's going on and to practice meditation, and of course to follow the Buddha's teaching. Now, so the Sariputta now turns to the Venerable Mahamoggallana, his own colleague. No? And he asks the Venerable Mahamoggallana, who do you think would purify this wonderful forest tonight? Now we know Mahamoggallana to be foremost, as a monk, foremost in psychic abilities, right? In those etheric powers. But here we have a surprise. He doesn't mention anything about psychic powers. In fact, if he does mention psychic powers, you find it's a little out of place here. Instead, this is what he says in section 8.3. Here, Avuso Sariputta, there are two monks engaged in a talk about the Dharma. They question one another, they clarify to one another the question that has been asked. Without hesitation, their Dhamma talk smoothly flowing. So here, in other words, the focus is on the Dharma. And Sariputta is often said to be a very patient teacher. He would train all these new monks very carefully, and when they are ready, then these monks go on practicing meditation and attain awakening, even arahathood. And Sariputta also would help in the monks to be trained also. So they work together to help these new monks in their training. So here we see Moggallana not talking about psychic powers, but talking about monks who know the Dhamma, discussing Dhamma, having Dhamma dialogue. And this is very important to note here. In a sense, we might say, although this sutta comes from the second period, we know this because there's the mention of Ananda is the Buddha's personal attendant. And as we know, Ananda became the Buddha's personal attendant in the last 25 years of the Buddha's public ministry. That's called the second period. So, despite that fact, this sutta must be quite early during that second period, because we have all this focus on the Dharma instead of talking about psychic abilities. Here we have Mahamoggallana not talking about his psychic abilities, but talking about teaching Dharma. So we can say, in that sense, that the sutta is quite early, maybe the first part of the last, or the second period, if you like. Maybe the third decade, right? Third decade of the Buddha's public ministry. Okay, so now all the monks have already kind of talked about who this ideal monk or this wonderful monk can be. And now Moggallana asks, okay, Sariputta, now it's your turn. We all have spoken, so what about you? So this is what Sariputta says. 9.3. Here also Moggallana, it is a monk who masters his mind, not a monk who is ruled by his mind. In the morning or forenoon, in whatever dwelling or attainment he wishes, he dwells in that dwelling or attainment in the morning. In the day, or in the middle of the day, in whatever dwelling or attainment he wishes, he dwells in that dwelling or attainment in that day. Here, dwelling here means meditation, okay, or dwelling, okay. Usually, for example, loving kindness. In the evening, in whatever dwelling or attainment he wishes, he dwells in that dwelling or attainment in the evening. So here, in other words, this wonderful monk can do any meditation he wants, any time of the day, going to very deep levels. Then the Venerable Sariputta gives an analogy, a parable of the cloth. Suppose also Moggallana, a king or a king's minister, has a closet full of cloths, or clothes if you like, dyed in various colors. In the afternoon, whatever piece of cloth he wishes to wear, he would wear that very piece of cloth, a very pair of cloth in the afternoon. And so also in the midday and in the evening. Okay, so any time of the day, morning, daytime, at night, he would just this big collection of cloths or clothes, and he changes as he wishes. So also this monk, he can meditate in any kind of meditation he wants. So this is Sariputta's ideal monk, so to speak. So here again, notice Sariputta doesn't say this monk has great wisdom, although Sariputta is declared as the foremost monk in wisdom, Mahapanya. So here, in other words, we can guess perhaps that listing in the chapter 1 of Anguttara Nikaya, in the Ittadagga chapter, where the monks are declared to be foremost in various qualities, was done a bit later. Okay? So here is at a time when these monks would talk about the qualities that they feel are really special, not the abilities attributed to them by the Buddha or by the monks or what are called the council elders. So this is something worth thinking about. It's not that they don't have those qualities, it is that they all, being arahats, have this very similar ability, having understood the Dharma and to teach the Dharma in some way. Of course, some teach better than others, depending on their previous abilities. But given the chance, if you listen to them carefully, they'll be able to teach you something. Right, so everybody has spoken now. So they always remember the Buddha and they say, okay, why don't we all go and see the Buddha now? Why don't we go and see the Blessed One? And so they all went there. And here Sariputta addresses the Buddha, bows down to him, and then tells the Buddha, the whole story, what happened. Everything is repeated one more time for the benefit of the audience who are listening to this sutta. And then when the whole story has been told, this is what Sariputta asked the Buddha, section 17. When this was spoken, the Venerable Sariputta said this to the Blessed One, "Now, Bhante, which of us have spoken well?" In other words, it's almost like a sports competition, if you like. Which of us is the best? Okay. Of course, we more or less can guess what the Buddha is going to say. Buddha says, "Sariputta, you have all spoken well, each in your own way. But," okay, that means that now the Buddha has got his own answer, okay? "But listen now to me too, on the kind of monk who would illuminate the Gosingasal forest." Here, Sariputta, a monk, after returning from his alms round and finishing his meal, sits cross-legged, keeping his body upright, establishes mindfulness before him, thinking, "For as long as I have not freed my mind from the mental influxes through not clinging, I will not break this sitting posture." Right? It's a kind of a reminder of the Bodhisattva himself, that before becoming Buddha, how he sat down, meditated under the Bodhi tree. Skin and bone may dry up, whatever may happen, I will not rise until I awaken, declared the Buddha. So, here again, the Buddha is saying, don't give up. This monk who doesn't give up, that's the kind of monk who would beautify this place. Of course, all the monks are happy. Surely they must have said sadhu. The Blessed One said this, the venerable monks joyfully delighted in the Blessed One's word. And the sutta ends there. So we find here a very happy sutta, talking about the monks living together very peacefully. There are no laymen present here. It's a moonlit night. And this is one sutta which is very clear in the sense that we know the time, we know the duration. And it's just a few hours on a full moon day in this wonderful forest, salt forest with the flowers all in full bloom. So this kind of sutta makes us feel good and happy. It also reminds us how the Arahats remind us what are really essential, what are really important when we study the Dharma. It is not the rituals, it's not all this philosophical stuff, it's not even about making vows, about becoming Buddhas or becoming Bodhisattvas or having magical powers, right? It's just to practice the Buddha's teaching, to let go of defilements, to be free from suffering in this life itself. So we see there the simplicity of early Buddhism, which we should remember and practice even today. And as monks, especially for monks, they should be reminded why they renounce the world. Because nowadays it is so easy to get distracted once you put on the robe. I mean, if you are not skilled in speaking or in the Dharma, you don't get much support from the lay people, and then you might not feel happy, and then you try to start worrying about that. That's not good. You're not really renounced well. On the other hand, you might struggle to start a retreat center, to raise funds for this and that. Again, this is not the right thing to do. I mean, if we become monks, our purpose is just to live day to day, practicing the Dhamma, practicing meditation, and to build up our wisdom and liberation in this life itself. Then when we become knowledgeable and calm and attain to some level of meditation, we get lots of lay people coming to us. We must be very careful not to socialize. Remember what Mahakassapa says. Some very well-known monks today, they socialize so much that until there's so much problems and difficulties, they become controversial for the wrong reasons. So this is where a monk should be really self-contained, be at peace with himself. And so that when he speaks to the lay people, they feel happy, they feel the Dharma, and they don't have to worry about controversies and problems. So do remember the teachings of the Mahagosinya Sutta. Let us now do a short reflection to close this study. The spirit of the Dharma is still with us in the suttas. Although scholars may tell us there are all kinds of difficulties in the text of the teachings, we know where the Dharma is concerned, there is a living tradition handed down through the forest tradition, through the forest monks, and also through other monks who know these teachings. And as long as we are diligent in learning the Dharma and doing our meditation, then the letter and meaning of the text of the suttas become clear to us. The text of the suttas, the letter of the sutta may not be perfect, but there is this living tradition which flows through the flesh and blood and practice and breath of the meditators. Reflecting in this way is wonderful good karma. But upon such good karma, may we be well and happy in this life itself. By all the good deeds we have done, may we aspire to attain spiritual liberation, especially stream winning in this life itself. In this moment of peace, let us spread and radiate our loving kindness to all the beings here, that they may be well and happy, to all our teachers and loved ones, to all those working for the Dharma, practicing the Dharma, seeking the Dharma, may they be well and happy. May they find the true teaching and awaken. And to those whom the Dharma have not touched, may they too see the true teaching and awaken in due course. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.